So with all of that, and no further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Massimo Portincaso. He is, to me, the person on the planet who best can explain why we have a deep tech wave innovation and what it is. And sometimes, some years back, I actually introduced him like if deep tech was a religion, Massimo would have been Jesus. So I'm really, really delighted to have you here, Massimo, and take it away. So,
the title of the presentation is a bit of a provocative one because the title of the presentation is Deep Tech is Dead, Long Live Deep Tech. And it's a little bit, this is what happened, I think it was in France when the king was dead, they would say the king is dead, and long live the king because there was a new king. And to me, this sentence is the way to frame and state that I think that deep tech is entering a new phase. And this is why I'm provocatively calling it, declaring it dead. Also because you start seeing everybody calling themselves deep tech. You know, people doing SaaS, saying we're doing deep tech as well. So I wanted just really to keep the edge compared to where everything is. But I think that I'll try to focus a little bit on what I think deep tech is before I go and explain what do I think is the phase in which we're entering right now. Okay. Anyhow, I'll start explaining, talking about the ways, because I think it's really important to consider and see those waves and understand the things in context where they're coming from. Because the first big innovation wave was the one that happened with the first and the second industrial revolution. This is where basically the foundation of the civilization we know was set. And it was big inventors like Haber-Bosch, who came with Haber-Bosch process, the Bessemer process for steel. Many of those things go back to that time. And this is really the basis on which we have built the current society as we know it today. These waves stayed till the Second World War that drove a lot of innovation. And with the Second World War, there was a new big wave of innovation that culminated with literally us going to the moon and with the invention of the computer. This triggered, and if the first industrial and the second industrial revolution were all about the atoms, we started introducing the notion of the bits with the Second World War and the computer. So we had the second wave, which was about big corporation, state-funded innovation that came out with the computer and brought us to the moon. This kept us going till the 70s, when a new wave of innovation came, and then what the computer was brought really the digital age. It started with Apple, with Microsoft, with many of those companies, Google, the Meta of this world. And this is when really the bits took over to a certain extent. So we went from the bits, the atoms from the first and second industrial revolution to a pure focus on the atoms, on the bits in the third wave. But now the phase that we have entered a few years ago is the one where the cycle is closing, basically, the loop is closing, and we can combine the atoms of the first and the second industrial revolution with the bits of the second and bring those things together. And this is really important to see because this group is closing. And there's been a lot of talk about deep tech, and you'll hear the word deep tech again and again. And a lot of people start talking about deep tech in terms of deep technology. And I think this is the wrong way of looking at it, because technology has always been disruptive technology or non-disruptive technology, frontier technology. The point is, it's not the definition of the technology itself, but the use that you make it. The same way when Clay Christensen defined disruptive innovation, he said there are no disruptive innovation per se, is the way you make use of the technology to make the technology disruptive. The same is true for deep tech. It's not that about the technology is a deep technology, yes or no. It's quantum a deep technology. Quantum is right now a frontier technology, but is the use that we make them is going to make this technology a deep technology. So I think fundamentally the misunderstanding that is out there that deep tech is about technology, but deep tech is fundamentally a completely different approach to innovation that allows us to do things in a completely different way. And the first thing that it does is that it dramatically expands the option space. So it expands the option space in which you move from innovation that is normally 10, 15, 20% to an innovation which is 10, 20x better than what you have today. And it does this by expanding the option space and allowing us to find solutions that normally we wouldn't be able to see. And how does it do it? It does through basically two different convergences. On the one side, there is the convergence of approaches, basically, and this is a very important point. And now that I've become myself an entrepreneur, I'm realizing how important this convergence is and what the role is played. So there is a convergence in the same place in the company of science with the problem that we're trying to solve, and engineering building the bridge between the two. And when I started all of this research, I was still back at BCG, I was putting a lot of emphasis on the science side of things. I would say science is doing incredible things, what we can do today. I come now to realize that actually the most important phase, the most important part of this convergence is the engineering part, that is connecting the problem with the solution that is coming from the science. But without the engineering bridge, those solutions are not industrially relevant, they cannot get the scale or a price point that make them available. So ultimately, deep tech, I'm realizing more and more, is an engineering exercise. Even if you think that it's about technology, science, and so on, if you don't get the translation with engineering, you cannot bring it to the market and make money with it. And this is what drives innovation, because that's what really let people advance things. On the other side, and similarly important in all of this, is the notion that you have a convergence or you have a complete reset, because what is happening, the technologies are coming together. So we have reached now, because of the science, a capability of manipulating energy and matter to a level that was unthinkable 20 years ago. Think about what we can do at the nanotech level, what we can do in terms of biology, what we can do in terms of energy. It's really a new work. And this per se is great, but what the big advancement that is happening right now is that we can pair this capability of manipulating with the completely new capability in terms of cognition and computation. So not only we can manipulate, but we can also apply cognition and computation to this manipulation. And again, another very underestimated important piece that makes this equation work is the sensing and actuation part. We have matter and energy on the one side, you have computation and cognition, but without the sensing and actuation capabilities, which goes back to the engineering part, you cannot really extract the value out of the manipulation of the matter in a way that makes it economically viable. And those are, for me now, what is coming out of is the kind of to the hidden champion of deep tech, which are on the one side the engineering component, on the other side the sensing and actuation capability that allows us to really to bring this power to the road ultimately. The last point is, because we are expanding the options dramatically, of course, you can go and try to find all possible solutions. You can do many things. So what is really important in this context is always coming from the problem, and in the problem, and then bringing together the different pieces that are needed to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And this is reverse to basically what happens in most of the times in universities. This is a big paradigm shift. In university, you come up with something and then you start, oh, I have developed a new technology, and then let's try to find a solution to which we can apply. Is the famous, the hammer looking for a nail. And we need to really have the different approach and really start, this is the problem, and let's try to look for all the different solutions we can find in the university to solve this problem. And last but not least, and this is something that probably you will relate the most based on what you've been listening and reading a lot lately, is about the fact that not only we expand the option space to solve specific problems, the option space is much, much bigger, but we can find those solutions much, much faster. And the way we do it is that we apply the design, build, test, learn, so we can design things, we can build them quickly, learn how it works, and continue to iterate till we find something that works. And this is something that's always been the case, but the pace at which we can do it right now is unprecedented, because we're bringing together all the different pieces. What is really important, and what I want to emphasize, is that loop is particularly important, because today everybody's talking about generative AI, and generative AI is great. But one thing is to come up and develop millions of possible solutions. But then the big difficulty, and what is going to be the big challenge to cope with the power of generative AI, is how to translate, how to produce the possible designs that are coming to generative AI in a physical manner, translate them and test them. This is really the biggest challenge that we have ahead of us, because if you find a way, because imagine we are creating a huge funnel with the big bottleneck, which is then the translation to the physical world. So this is really widening that funnel to reduce that bottleneck, to accelerate even further is going to become a very, very important part. So this is what is happening today. Huge potential. We can increase the option space, find solution to problems that were unthinkable before in a much faster way because we have this generative cycle. And ultimately, if you extrapolate this, what is happening today, and I cannot stress this enough, the point in time in which we are now is, I love to say, is really comparable to the one that we had 10,000 years ago, roundabout, when we moved from being hunters-gatherers to being farmers. It's just that the big shift that is happening now is that we're going from being hunters-gatherers of resources to becoming farmers at the atomic level. This is basically what is happening. Instead of domesticating cows and sheep, we're now domesticating organisms to produce what we want. We're working with nature and at the nano level to really bring the forces together to do what we want to do and print atoms by atom things that is today possible into this. So this is a major shift because the society based on the first and the second industrial revolution were all based on an exploitative paradigm. And when I say exploitative, I mean going from bigger to smaller. If you look at the petrochemical side, is long chain of polymers that were reduced to small one with a huge amount of energy going into that process to be able to do so. And now we can reverse this. What we can do is instead we can go from the smaller to the bigger in a generative process and assemble things from the bottom up, which has the consequence, if you have an exploitative paradigm, you are a scarcity mindset, you are limited from what is available. While if you start from the bottom, then you can really put things together and you're not limited from what you have. It's really a completely different way upon which society is built. So a much, much, much better world that we have ahead of us if we manage the transition. And to be able to do this transition, my point about really putting emphasis on the engineering side and putting emphasis on the sensing and actuation becomes a really, really important one, because without those two bridges, the shift from the left to the right side of this chart is not going to be possible. So you will say, fantastic. Deep tech is coming, new process innovation. We should be all happy and we can all go home and think the future is safe. No. And let me start with this. This is a chart I put together in a report that I wrote back in 2021. It was in the midst of the height of the bubble and everything. But those were all companies that were super valued. They're really doing great. Everybody, I was the one saying, you should invest in deep tech. Look at those companies, how they're going. Fast forward 2024, the market went in a completely different direction. And if you look at their performance, there is a lot of red. A lot of those companies were basically, they didn't deliver, quite simply. A lot of them were in the US, but not only, but they simply didn't deliver. So should we say, and this was the point, is deep tech dead? Was just a fade, and then now let's go back to the user. And I think it would be a very big mistake to think that deep tech was a fade and that the loss of valuation in these companies is a proof that it's business as usual, because this is not the case. And to be able to really understand that is really, we need to understand what is behind that. And first corporate, when it comes to this, being now an entrepreneur myself, I would love to blame VCs for everything that is not working. So I say it's all fault of the VCs, but this is not true. There are some issues there because the playbook at which they are operating is the wrong one. One thing is to develop software, and I'll get back to it in a second. One thing is to develop things that are physical. And I'm having now those discussions explaining we're building things that cost millions. So I need some money to build those things. But I think, you can scale, just buy some capacity on AWS and you can scale your company. I say, no, that doesn't work this way. But apart from my small rant on VCs, the point is that to be able to make what I was describing happen, you really need to look at it systemically. So you really need to bring all the different parts together, because this deep tech is ultimately the application and the solution to complex problems. It's just all about managing complexity to a certain extent, and you need to bring together all the different parts. And that's why I've always been a big fan of what is done at the Deep Tech Alliance, because it's a way to bring this ecosystem together, and what Magnus has been doing with things. So this is a really important part. But, and this is the most important chart of it's a very important chart of the presentation. And this is really, there is a deep need for understanding But when it comes to deep tech, when I come and move from the bits world to the atom and bits world, this gap that you have, the scaling up, is the most difficult things, because you have no revenues, and then the moment it starts working at industrial scale, you have all of a sudden millions in revenue. But you need a leap of faith to be able to go, an investor and a system that supports you in being able to do it. Because if you don't manage to do this, we will not be able to redo the economic and industrial tissue, which needs to be redone, because we have seen it's not sustainable the way it is today. We can redo it in a sustainable way, but we need to learn how to manage that gap, because if you see on the software side, you have this linear, you can continue, you need more capacity, you have server capacity at AWS, and you can scale and reach millions of people. But here you have your pilot, and then you start building a facility, and you start producing, and then you continue. And this gap, managing this gap, is really, really important how you do this. And there are possible solutions to do that. We need to bring different investors on board. Corporate are really, really, really important in all of this. And I think this is one missing part that we're really lacking. I mean, we're lacking investors in the first place, and the family part for the family offices, definitely the pension funds in Europe. But corporate plays such an important role, because scaling these physical pieces, if you need to build it, you need to be able to leverage what is existing, and this is going to accelerate the transition. And corporate plays a very important role, both as off-taker of the new technology, but also as co-developer of the new technology. And the last part is really we need to completely rethink the way financing is done, and project financing and industrial financing needs to be redone to be able to accelerate all of this. You might think this is a dream, this is absolutely not possible, but the truth is this is possible. Actually, Sweden is quite ahead of the game when it comes to that, because the Vargas Group, the Vargas Holding, has been really showing how this can be done. They've done this with Northvolt, they've done it with H2 Green Steel, bringing industry, bringing family office, bringing institutional investor, off-take agreement. They've played that playbook very well, and this is a very good example. This is a former paper mill in the northern part of Sweden that has been now reconverted to become a gigafactory for producing batteries. So this future, this transition from an exploitative to a generative is absolutely possible. But we need really to put our act together, understand what are the fundamentals underlying that, and put in place an infrastructure and a financing element to that allows really to drive this. Vargas has shown that this is possible. I deeply believe that this is possible, but it's not something that is going to happen by itself. It requires a lot of work from all of us. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.